Hi, everybody. I'm glad you're here to see our second part on migrating waterfowl. Like I said last week, you usually can see these guys in January or February, so we're a little late with it, but this will get you prepped for next year. Don't forget, write all of your findings down in your nature journals. Those are such handy things for you guys to have, even when you get older, you know? And then when you get those things in your nature journals, put them in the iNaturalist site because the Madison Natural Heritage Group really wants that information, okay? All right, so if Miss Shauna would share the screen, we're gonna go ahead and get started with our second part on migrating waterfowl.
Here we go.
Okay. And starting today, we're going to start with one of my favorite birds because they're really easy to spot on a lake. They're called hooded mergansers. Okay, and you'll see a picture of those guys. I love the shapes of their heads. They're so cute. So how do we ID these guys? Okay, they're small ducks. They're about this big. Okay, they have a really thin bill, and you can see from that first picture where you can see all the black bills there, you can see how thin they are, kind of thin and pointy. And they have a fan-shaped collapsible crest. Wow, that's a lot of words, isn't it? What the fan-shaped collapsible crest is that thing on their head that's sticking up. And it'll either go up or down, but it's pretty puffy when it's down too. So you can pretty much ID these guys.
That is cool.
Yeah. It makes their head, when it's down, it makes their head look kind of egg-shaped. So that's a pretty way to ID them too. They're black on the back and above with a white breast and rich crescent flanks, meaning brown. Their black head has a large white patch that varies in size when the crest is raised or lowered. So if you see that first pic there, guys, you can see one of the birds has his crest up and that patch looks really big. The one right in front of him has his crest down and it looks like a big white stripe, okay? They can weigh about 1 to 3 pounds. And then the brown bird in front of those two males, that's a female hooded mergansers. And once again, the females aren't as richly colored as the males because they're not the ones that are trying to attract a mate, the males are. Okay, so where do they live? Whoops, hang on just a second. They live in forested wetlands throughout most of the eastern half of North America. Hang on, I'm having a problem with this. Okay. And they nest in treeless wetlands where people have to put up nest boxes. So just like the wood ducks, people will put up nest boxes for these guys. They're most common around the Great Lakes. They range from spruce fir forests in the Northwest to pine hardwood forests, cottonwood, elder, riparian forests. What's a riparian forest? Does anybody know? A riparian forest is any forest that's going to back up. Here's somebody. That's going to back up against a river or a stream. So it's a forested riverbank, basically, is what riparian is. Just remember riparian R, river, that kind of helps you a little bit, okay? But they're all over the place, these guys are. They like to winter in shallow freshwater, brackish bays, tidal creeks, and estuaries. Now, we talked about estuaries last time. Does anybody remember what an estuary is? An estuary is where a stream of fresh water mixes when the tide comes in with salt water. Those two waters mix together and they form in this area. And those are very specific biomes that only certain animals can live in. These guys like to hang out there when they're down there on their vacations from the winter. Okay, so they're pretty much all over the place. But yeah, anywhere you're going to see a lake, you'll probably see a hooded merganser at one time or another. Their diet, they like small fish, aquatic insects, crustaceans. What's a crustacean?
Like a crab?
Yeah, crabs, crayfish. Usually crayfish is what you'll find in lakes. Amphibians, frogs, vegetation, and mollusks. And mollusks are like snails, you know, stuff like that. Stuff that I wouldn't want to eat at all, but they find very yummy. Okay, so let's have some interesting facts on these guys, because like I said, I love these birds. They dive in clear, shallow forest ponds, rivers, and streams, and they locate their prey by sight. So in other words, they've got eyes that are really adapted to seeing underwater. So they'll stick their head in the water and they'll kind of look around and they'll kick their feet while they're looking, kind of like snorkeling. Think of it that way. They're looking for food, okay? Once they find some prey, they're going to use those really thin bills to grab them. And their bills are serrated. They don't necessarily have teeth, but they're kind of jaggy. So they'll grab a hold, they'll be able to get a hold of their prey better, especially underwater where stuff is really slippery. Ducklings will dive for food right after leaving the nest. And if you look at that third picture over, you'll see all those little ducklings with their little fuzzy heads. They're just so cute.
She looks like she's got a mohawk. I
She
love
does.
it. She's like punk rock.
Yeah, yeah. Punk rock duck. I like that. Their dives are short and shallow, the ducklings are, during their first week. And they can also just feed by, like I said, gliding around with their head under the water, just gobbing up duckweed or whatever's there. So they're pretty interesting. Their legs are really far back on their body, so it makes them kind of awkward when they try to land. When they take flight, they'll run across the water and they'll flap their wings really, really hard. But then when they're landing, they will also flap their wings really, really hard, and they don't glide. You'll see some ducks will kind of glide in and skid to a stop. These guys will just skid to a stop, okay? Another interesting fact is females that are sitting on the nest, if a predator comes near, they will use the broken wing defense on predators. Does anybody know what that is?
Do they like act like they have a broken wing?
It's really interesting. They'll act like they have a broken wing. They'll hop off the nest and they'll hang their wing down and they'll start hopping away from the nest so the predator will follow them to get them away from the eggs. A lot of birds do this. And they can fly at speeds up to almost 50 miles an hour.
Wow.
Yeah. When the ducklings are in the water, they stay together in a real tight, compact group. You may mistake them for like a muskrat when they're swimming along because of all the brown. And what it does is it helps deter aerial predators like sharp-shinned hawks, red-shouldered hawks, because they're all in a group. It doesn't make sense to me because I would think he could just slam in there and grab a bunch of them, but maybe it thinks that they're another animal because they're all so close together and he may not be able to pick them up. They can remain submerged for under 2 minutes while they're fishing. They do resurface to swallow their prey. They can't swallow underwater. And when they come out, they'll flip the fish up so it's head first, and then they swallow it down. They don't like to swallow it by their tail. It avoids injury from spiny fins. That's why they do it. So if you think about it, if they're swallowing the fish and its tail first, all those fins are going to be sticking up. If they flip it and swallow it, they're just all going to slide right down. That makes sense. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we have a call on there. If Miss Shauna would play that call, if you would play the female calls and the wing sounds.
All right. See what we get.
But yeah, these are really cool birds. These are fun to see.
I just have calls and then wing sounds.
Yeah, play them both then. That's fine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, either one. And the one you're hearing that rat, that's what it is. It sounds like a frog.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if you'll play the wing sounds.
Oh, I think I've heard that.
Hear that high-pitched sound, guys? That's the sound that the wings make. Yeah. All right, so now we're going to move on to the Ruddy Duck. Why did I pick this guy? Look at his beak. I love the Ruddy Duck because of his beak, okay? They're small, compact ducks, so they're kind of tightly packed, kind of stout. They have scoop-shaped bills, meaning they'll come up at the end just a little bit, and they have long, stiff tails, and they're always holding them upward. So if you'll see these guys, you'll see his little tail up there, like he's really paying attention.
Yeah.
Okay? They have black caps on their heads that contrast with the white face. So you can see that in those pictures. In the summer, their bodies are really nice, rich chestnut brown, and they get those bright blue bills. Now, those are the males. The female, you can see her right in front of them. They're not as brightly colored. But if you see these males around, more than likely there will be females there. Females and first-year males are brownish, somewhat like the winter males, but they have a blurry stripe across their cheek patch. And if you see that female there, right there in that first picture, you can see that little stripe, okay? Their habitat, they like to, hang on a sec, guys.
So they only get the blue color in the summertime?
It's always blue, but it'll be brighter,
Brighter.
in the summer.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. They like wetlands and reservoirs from southwestern Canada through most of the western United States as Mexico, scattered sites in the eastern United States. So they're pretty much all over, just like the Merganzers. They like to stop in a variety of habitats when they're migrating. They like permanent wetlands, lakes, and reservoirs. They're ducks, of course they do. Their wintering habitat includes freshwater wetlands, lakes, reservoirs, brackish bays, coastal marshes, and once again, those tidal estuaries. So basically anywhere you see some water with some fresh water in it, you're gonna find these guys, okay? Their diet also pretty much a duck diet. They like aquatic insects, crustaceans, zooplankton. Now, what's that? You know those little microscopic animals you see in water. If you take a drop and pop it on the microscope, you can see all these little things swim around. They like to eat those. They also like other invertebrates, and they eat some aquatic plants and seeds. So they eat a lot of stuff that's in the water. Some interesting facts about these guys: they forage mostly by diving to the bottom of shallow ponds. They strain mouthfuls of mud through thin plates on their bills, and then they swallow anything that's left behind. Ugh. So basically, it's kind of like they've got, now, it's not really a spaghetti strainer, but it's kind of like they have this strainer in their mouth, and with those bills, they'll go down and they'll scoop up mud, or get all the mud in their mouth and kind of strain all the mud out, spit that out, and eat what's left. They're kind of lazy that way. They don't need to hunt much, but they do spend the vast majority of their time on water. They're fast flyers, but they don't maneuver very well. They like to swim and dive rather than to fly to escape the predators. They're quick swimmers. And their eggs out of all the waterfowl are the largest. And actually they lay the largest egg of any duck in the world. So these guys will have really big eggs. They're pretty aggressive during the breeding season, and they've been known to chase rabbits away from their nests. They don't fool around. They don't do the broken wing thing. If the rabbit shows up, get out of here, and they will chase them. And I don't know if you've ever been chased by a mad duck, but they can be kind of scary, especially if you're a little bitty rabbit. Yeah. All right, now we have some calls for these guys, if Ms. Shauna would play those. That peeping sound. They're kind of squeaky too. Remember the wood duck sounded like a dog's squeaky toy? These guys kind of have that same sound. All right, so now the last one we're going to talk about is the northern shoveler. And this is another one of my favorites because he's so pretty. But if you look at that first picture on the slide, can you figure out why they call him a shoveler? Yeah.
That big.
Look at his bill. Yeah, that's a shovel-shaped bill. And he's about a medium-sized duck. And when he sits in the water, his butt's going to be out a little higher than the rest of them. Okay. It's almost like, if you think about it, it's almost like his bill is so big, it's pulling him forward.
Like it's top.
Yeah, it's tilting him. The male shovelers are bold white, blue, green, and rust. You can see the colors on them. They're beautiful. They have a white chest and white lower sides, which you can see on that first picture. And then they've got that chestnut patch that comes up. Of course, the black shovel-like bill. And then if you look at the middle one, those are the females. And you'll also see another one next to her buddy up there on the right-hand side. They're brown. They have some powdery blue on the wings that you can sometimes see, but I wouldn't rely on it. And they have orange bills. So the females will have the same shape bill, but it'll be an orange color. Habitat. Where do we think these guys like to live? I bet you after learning about all these migrating waterfowl, you probably figured it out.
Wetlands.
Yes, shallow wetlands with submerged vegetation, nesting along the margins and in neighboring grassy fields. They like to forage in salt marshes, estuaries, lakes, flooded fields, wetlands, agricultural ponds, and even like wastewater ponds sometimes, because wastewater ponds attract insects and other things like that, but they're not around there a lot. Their diet, they like tiny crustaceans. So once again, those crayfish that you'll find in lakes and ponds, other aquatic invertebrate, any kind of fish, seeds, which they filter out of water with cone-like projections called lamellae. And that's kind of like your intestines have little cilia. They're kind of like fibers that move stuff along. That's what they have lining their bills. So when they go to scoop water out of the lake, all the water goes out, but those little feathery lamellae that are inside their bills keep all the food in. So then they can just swallow it. It's kind of like the ruddy ducks, but they don't go down to the bottom and dig up stuff. Some interesting facts about these guys. They swim a lot with their bills in the water and they swing them side to side. Okay. And what they're actually doing is they're feeding, but they're using that lamellae that's in their mouth to filter out all the other stuff. And then they're getting all the good stuff in there. They molt. And what does molt mean?
Is that when they get rid of like old feathers or something?
Yeah. They molt their flight feathers before migrating south, which doesn't make any sense. Why would they do that? It's just something that happens to these ducks. But what they do is they become flightless for a little while. When they molt those flight feathers, they can't fly. So what they do after that particular molting, they'll stay hidden and they'll stay in vegetation in lake areas. So if you happen to be walking around a very heavy vegetated area next to a lake and you happen to see one of these guys, he probably can't fly at that moment. They're not hurt. They're just waiting for those other feathers to come in. So they're hiding from predators, basically. They work together. Occasionally they work together in groups while feeding. And what they'll do is they'll put all their butts in a circle and they'll rotate like a pinwheel and they'll kick their feet. And what they're doing is they're stirring up food from the bottom and then they'll start to skim for the particles. So they'll
that's
kind of work
cool
together. Yeah. So if you would play the calls, I think there should be a male and a female, number 1 and number 2 on there. Okay.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, think about a chuck, chuck.
Yep.
And she said, was that the female?
Yeah.
Yeah, she sounds like a kazoo.
She does.
So the northern shoveler, to help remember the male call, the chuck, chuck, I kind of think of like the sound of a shovel, chuck, 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 kind of. Yeah, I mean, it's a stretch, but it helps. But anyway, so there are the rest of your migrating waterfowl, and that's just touching the surface. I swear, guys, go out to Lake Junaluska in January or February and go early in the morning, and you will see some of the most beautiful birds out there. Take your binoculars, but you'll see tons of them. My most exciting thing, and he's not migrating, but one day when I was out at the lake watching these at Lake Junaluska, there was a kingfisher out there. And we haven't talked about kingfishers, but I got to watch a kingfisher dive from a tall tree and come back up with a fish right in his mouth. And they're really cool to watch. All right, the last slide has books that we have within the Cardinal system, all about birds and waterfowl and all of that. I suggest if you want to go out bird watching, it is a fun hobby. It's kind of like collecting something. You get to collect, ooh, I saw this bird, and you write it down. But get a guidebook. Guidebooks are the best. They'll help you quickly identify a bird. For example, I had a brown thrasher in my yard the other day, and I wasn't quite sure what it was. I thought it was a thrasher, grabbed my book, got my binoculars, looked it up, was like, yes, I was right. So I got to write that down in the book. But anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this talk. Don't forget to put all stuff in your nature journal and on iNaturalist. We're really counting on that. And the next program, which will be the first Tuesday of May. No, wait, it'll be the third week of this month, April. I'm sorry, I'm getting my months mixed up. We are going to learn all about spring plants and how to ID them. And once again, like with the birds, there are a ton of plants that come out in the spring. So I'm going to touch the surface on some more common ones so you'll know what they are. and then you guys can take up with those and get a plant ID book for later. But hopefully I'll see you week after next. I hope you're enjoying the YouTube videos, and thanks a lot for watching.